blurry, and I am so embarrassed by them sometimes. Anyway, tonight we are going to talk about the burger chef murders. This is another case that I've picked up and put down and picked up and put down because I really don't have a great deal about the victims to tell you. In fact, what I'm about to tell you, I just discovered last night as I was looking for more info on this case. Are you ready? Let's get right into it. The night of November 17th was a Friday, and people were gearing up for the weekend. After servicing the last late-night customers with a craving for char-broiled burgers, 4 part-time employees at Speedway Burger Chef closed down the restaurant at 11 p.m. Jane Friedit, the assistant manager, was 20 years old and a college student in November of 1978. Her list of extracurricular activities was long and distinguished. Yearbook staff, choir, drama, library assistant, and the list just went on and on. Her nickname was Sweet Jane, which I think is so adorable. People remembered her because of her beaming smile and her positive disposition. She had been working for the Burger Chef company since she was 16 years old. I'm sorry, 17 years old. I can't read my own writing. And she had recently transferred to the Speedway, Indiana location after working at another Burger Chef location for the prior 3 years. Daniel Davis was a 16-year-old high school junior, and he had recently joined the Friday night closing shift when another employee quit a week earlier. Daniel brought jokes and laughter to this Friday night closing team. In his spare time, Daniel explored photography. He loved to take pictures, and he developed film in his own homemade darkroom in his spare time. On the Burger Chef grill that night was Mark Flemons, another 16-year-old sophomore at Speedway High School. Mark, like myself, was raised a Jehovah's Witness. He had 6 older siblings, and he was described as a friendly kid. His parents allowed him to get a job at the Speedway Burger Chef because it was within walking distance from their home. And last but not least, Ruth Ellen Sheldon rounded out the Burger Chef staff on this chilly November night. Ruth was a golden child to her parents. She was intelligent, driven, an honor student, and Ruth aspired to be a computer scientist one day. In addition to participating in several youth ministries at the Westside Church of the Nazarene, Ruth studied music at what is now the University of Indianapolis to earn early college credits. These 4 kids, full of promise, potential, went about their nightly closing duties that Friday. They shut down the registers, they counted the cash, they scrubbed the cookware, and they cleaned the floors. But sometime between 11 and midnight, or before midnight, I guess, something went terribly wrong. So, we're gonna go to a little after midnight on November 17th, 1978. A teenager named Brian Crane was driving. On his way home, the shop. But when Brian got to the restaurant, he noticed something really strange. All of the lights to the restaurant were still on, and the door was still unlocked. Upon further investigation, he found that the 4 people on shift that day were just gone. They were nowhere to be found, and the safe where the restaurant's daily earnings was kept was left wide open, with around $580 missing. Each article I read had a different number, always in the $580 range. So, not a great deal, but a lot in 1978 for 4 teenagers, right? So, Brian starts thinking, yeah, I don't have the full story, so he calls around to see if he can track down the manager, Jane, assistant manager in charge of that shift. He calls another burger chef on the other side of town where Jane had previously worked, but that manager had not heard from her either. And finally, Brian starts to get worried. He gets scared, and he starts having a little doubt creep in. So he calls the head manager of the Speedway burger chef and tells him what he's walked into. And this manager says, "Call the police." And so Brian does. Now, the Speedway police were less than concerned about these 4 teenagers. They came to the restaurant. Sure, it was odd that the back door that wasn't normally used was open, and that Ruth and Jane had left their purses behind, and all 4 of these kids had left their coats behind. But these responding officers chalked this up to teenage carelessness. They assumed that these 4 kids had taken the cash from this restaurant and gone out partying. "Oh, they'll turn up soon enough," was their conclusion. Police told friends and families of the victims that once the cash ran out and their hangovers wore off, they would turn up. Near the safe, police found 2 empty money bags, a used-up roll of tape, and the previous night's coins left behind. Only the cash money was taken, which the police took as further evidence of their joyriding theory. Now, the police in this case are pretty reckless, and later on they do admit this, but it really doesn't help at the time. They didn't follow through with immediate investigation for clues at the crime scene. In fact, even worse, this restaurant was due to open up again in the morning, so those employees came in and cleaned the entire place, getting it ready for the Saturday of service. Now, what they didn't realize when they were cleaning is that they were eradicating any incriminating evidence and clues towards this incident that had taken place in the homicide-free town of Speedway, Indiana. And it is completely crazy to me that the police allowed this to happen. And let's add insult to injury here. They did not take a single picture of the actual crime scene. In fact, later on, the only picture that showed up, the police later confessed they staged it. They went back in after the employees had cleaned and took a couple pictures of like the money bags next to the safe and stuff. Hello? What? Alright. So John and Rachel, the parents of Ruth Ellen, received a call End quote. Time passed as Rachel sat alone, and at one point, John took her hand and reminded her that their Ruth Ellen was a spunky girl who would break away and call home if it were at all possible for her to do so. But that call never came. By Saturday afternoon, Ruth Ellen and the 3 others were still missing, and the Sheldons knew it was only a matter of time before television, newspapers, and radio stations picked up on the story of the Burger Chef kids. They knew that they had to call their friends and family to tell them what happened before they could hear about it on the local news. Loved ones, shocked by the turn of events, gathered at John and Rachel's home to sit with them and pray for Ruth Ellen's safe return. And Saturday night segued into Sunday morning. We got very little sleep, Rachel wrote in her diary. In fact, none of these families were sleeping very well. As Robert Flemons awaited word about his son, he was haunted by a conversation he had had with Mark while watching television one recent night. The program had featured a kidnapping scene, which prompted Mark to tell his father that if he were ever captured, he would find a way to escape. Mark said, "I wouldn't lay still and die." He said he would break away, bobbing and weaving as he ran in order to be a harder target to hit. And it was this kind of statement that gave Robert hope that he would see his child again. And this thought buoyed his spirits when he was tired. Now, if the families of these 4 crew members were tired by this point, the police officers were exhausted too. This case was their top priority, and as first reports of the kidnapping appeared in the Indianapolis News and on WIBC 1070, authorities encouraged anyone with information pertaining to this case to please come forward. Things took a more serious turn when Jane Friedet's white Chevy Vega showed up. It was parked, abandoned in the middle of town. The driver's side door was locked, but the passenger side was not. Jane herself was nowhere to be found, and no evidence was found in the vehicle that would indicate where these missing employees had gone. For all intents and purposes, this car was just abandoned, not like his owner had been out all night partying. So, this is the point in the case where the police really start to take it seriously. They are starting to realize these kids are not out partying. They're not out joyriding. Something happened to them. They didn't just disappear of their own volition. Alright, so this case changes from a simple robbery to a potential kidnapping case. And a whole day had already passed since their victim a knife broke off in her chest and was left behind. Now, Mark Flemons, in my opinion, met the most tragic end of the four. He was beaten to death with what the medical examiner described as a chain-like item, and he had ultimately drowned in his own blood, which is, I think, the most terrible way that I have ever reported a case here on this channel, and I have over 300 cases. Now, the police did not think that this was a robbery because they found basically all the valuables with the four of them. Their watches, they still had money on their pockets, and they were still wearing their Burger Chef uniforms, which started to lead the police to believe that this motive was more murder rather than a robbery gone wrong. The four were determined to have died sometime late Friday night or early Saturday morning. A search of this crime scene turned up basically nothing. The gun, the knife handle, chain, or whatever object that was used on Mark were not found after a very thorough search of the area. This investigation blew up, with the Indiana police giving this case its absolute highest priority. The leading theory at the time, despite the oddities at the crime scene, was still a botched robbery. They believe that Mark, who was covering a shift for one of the other employees, recognized one of the robbers, and in an attempt not to leave any evidence behind, the robbers kidnapped them, leading them to their eventual demise. Why they believed it was Mark, I couldn't find that information. Soon after, an anonymous eyewitness came forth and gave descriptions of two men, one with a beard and the other that was clean-shaven. Both men were described as Caucasian, average height, and the clean-shaven one had fair hair. From what I read, this eyewitness was sitting kind of with his friend outside of the Burger Chef that evening, and they were kind of scurried along by these two men because there had been some vandalism in the town as of late. So these two men were at the Burger Chef in a car and told these teenage kids to go. Now, with this description, police made models of the potential suspects. Even with these clay models, though, the police were unable to find any leads in this case. That is, until a man in Greenwood, a city not far from Speedway, was in a bar, and he started talking a little about being one of the killers from the Burger Chef murders. He was soon brought in for interrogation, but he passed a polygraph test, so he was released. Now, considering that the general scientific community agrees that a polygraph test is inaccurate in an assessment of whether or not a person is being truthful or not, the Speedway Police's competency was once again kind of questioned. However, the man did give out descriptions and details of a gang of fast food chain robbers operating in the area that could be linked to these murders. And I thought it was really funny. I'm pulled in for something, but I'm going to point you in the other direction of exactly what you need. These fast victims, the police had to let both of them go. And after this case went cold. And even though the police increased the radius of the investigation to cover most of the country, investigators failed to come up with a lead. Country is much bigger than county, right? It wasn't until 1984, 6 years after the incident took place, that Donald Forrester, a man in the Pendleton Correctional Facility, called the police right up to confess to the Burger Chef murders. He told the police that he was one of the murderers and he could provide information to the law in exchange for him not to be put in the infamously violent Indiana State Prison. Now, the police, of course, were pretty skeptical of this at first, but after Forrester started pinpointing exact location of the bodies where they were found, they were not all found together. In fact, Daniel and Ruth were found like pretty close to side by side, but Jane was like 25 yards away, and Mark was even further away from them. So it wasn't like they were just lined up, and this guy knew that. And he told the police about the broken knife being lodged in the sternum of one of the victims. And in 1984, this wasn't knowledge that had been really released to the public. In fact, I think this was released as recently as 2020. So, at this point, his credibility has been boosted. He confessed to killing Daniel and Ruth by shooting them. He claimed that he went to collect a debt that Jane's brother James owed. And after Mark tried to intervene with his accomplices and Jane, a fight ensued, which left Mark unconscious. Thinking that Mark was dead, they abducted all 4 of the employees so that no witnesses would be left behind, and proceeded to drive them to the woods and kill them. Now his story gained more credibility after he told the police that he flushed the .38 caliber bullet casings in the toilet in his house. Now, police of course investigated this, and they did end up discovering the same casings. And it seemed that with the help of Forrester, the police would soon catch the remaining perpetrators. However, in a cruel twist of fate, someone leaked insider information from the police that Forrester was working as an informant for them. Upon hearing this, Mr. Forrester stopped cooperating with the police completely, claiming that he was forced into giving his confession. David Forrester would never speak of the Burger Chef murders again, and he died in police custody in 2006 from cancer, taking with him any information about this case that led to the tragic demise of 4 young, bright, but incredibly unfortunate individuals on that fateful Friday night in 1978. So unfortunately, guys, that's all the information I have in this case. Like, that is it. It has been 40 years and there is nothing. I absolutely hate that. I really do think that Mr. Forrester was involved. I don't know if when the information was leaked, he then was threatened by someone who was in jail with him or what. I don't know. I think it's kind of weird he then stopped cooperating with the police. I don't really know what he was in prison for. I didn't look that up to know if he was going to be there forever or had the potential for release, and this person threatened him when he got out. Or maybe he thought he would get sentenced to more time. I mean, he did just confess to murdering 2 teenagers. kids, right? I mean, that's a pretty big car to seat at least 6 people. I'm thinking maybe they potentially had to have like 3 people, because I feel like 2 people and 4 kids. I mean, they did have a gun, so maybe that logic doesn't really play out. Because I feel like if they had a gun, which they did, they could very easily, 2 of them, get 4 kids in a car. But the fact that no one saw anything, I mean, even if they went out the back door, unfortunately, it's 1978, not a lot of CCTV footage anywhere at that point in time, and from all of the articles that I read, I couldn't come up with any sort of sighting or anything that related to this case. There really just is not a lot of information. I am remarkably surprised that they were found within just 2 days. Usually things do not move that quickly. I, again, have to wonder how many people there were when you talk about the different methods of what happened to them. Now, I'm not saying that one person couldn't shoot people and then stab people and then beat someone, but I kind of feel like the different locations and things, some of them tried to run, or, you know, multiple people were hurting these kids at the same time, and it just absolutely makes me so furious. I mean, this robber got $580, and let's say there were 2 of them. That's really not a lot of money to take the lives of 4 children. Because I don't care if she was 20, she's still a kid. And it just absolutely breaks my heart. These 4 kids were just taken way before their times, way before they could even live. And it makes me absolutely devastated to have to sit here and not have but just a few sentences about each of them to share with you some 40 years later. In fact, for most of them, I could only find just one picture. And I don't think that all of their families are still alive to see this case brought to justice, if it ever is. And I hate that. I hate that. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I want you to know I appreciate each and every one of you, and I would ask you to please like, subscribe if you're not already, and leave me a comment down below. Leave me like your favorite food emoji, since we're honoring the Burger Chef victims tonight. If I were doing that on a video, it would be probably the little bowl of pasta. Also, this is a test to see if you're still awake, because if you're awake, you'll hear me ask you to do that. Thank you guys so much for being a part of my channel. I cannot tell you how much it means to me to be able to sit here and share this experience with you all. Thanks, guys.